All right, so we could just start off by stating your name and your professions.
Yeah, I'm Black Lick. I'm a hip hop artist, but I've taken hip hop into several different realms. I'm the hip hop program director for this station, WDC 90.1 FM. I'm also a DJ here as well as on WR 97.3 FM. I'm a recording artist on Strange Famous Records and Man Bites Dolls Records. I also teach a hip hop creative writing class to a private school group of middle schoolers right now at a place called Sabbath at Stony Point. I work with nonprofits as well. Public speaker on the side at times. I've done a TED Talk. And really just anything and everything following the path where hip hop takes me, yo.
Yeah. So, can you take us back to the beginning of your musical journey and what sparked your interest in music, particularly in the hip hop genre?
Yeah, like I came up off of off things like Wu-Tang and whatnot, right?
Mm.
And I could never find anything like that. Like as music changes and people change, music is an identifier, and it's like a backboard for you to figure out who you are. And at some point there was a divergent split. Like I no longer identified with the music that me and my peers were listening to. And so it kind of became like a closeted thing where I was writing rhymes and stuff. Because a lot of cats were really like up front on wanting to like rap or something. And so I always just kept writing. And my man, like I recorded a joint or two with my man Slug and stuff, my man Barnes, and then I really just like I was in freestyles and stuff. And my man Strick, he was like the first dude to like really believe in me. He rest in peace to that man. Today's his birthday actually, for one time for him. But Strick believed in me, and I recorded an EP that sounded like trash, but he loved it. And like when he heard me freestyle, he got amped. He was like, "Yo, you got a vocabulary. You got like this way of doing things." And it made me think about music in a different way. Like not only just how I've been secretly writing rhymes and poetry, but it allowed me to say, I can use this to tell my story and to help people identify with who I am and what I'm going through in the same way that it's allowed me to navigate life and to figure out my identity, and also as a shy person find a way to express myself in public forums, to be confident of myself as an individual. And I've just constantly stayed developing and failing a lot, and music just always was a way. You can always make a bad song because you can always make another song. Yeah. And I wrote a lot of bad rhymes, and I'll write some more probably, you know what I'm saying? But I also recorded a lot of great shit. And I just pushed the limits, man, performing and just following where it took me. And it's taken me places beyond my dreams, man. I never really had a goal that involved any of this in the sense of any kind of profession. It was more so just a way for me to have an outlet and to figure out who I am so that I can deal with people. And instead, it's turned into like a life-defining force for me and an outlet. And I can take it with me anywhere, and it's taken me to places that I never really even thought of. Man, I've done things that if you would have told me 10 years ago, hey, you're gonna do this, like, yeah, right. I mean, that was a radio and everything too, like all this stuff, man, and the relationships and the peers that I have and the respect that I've gained in the industry from all sorts of legendary underground MCs, especially that I was listening to before I ever wrote a rhyme. Like I can text them now. Yeah. And they listen to my albums and stuff like that. So it's one of those things where I found that also, just to say, hip hop allowed me to create non-confrontational spaces around people who may not like each other, but would have to respect each other through the context of a cipher. So if I throw a freestyle session, or if I'm in one, everybody is respected as equals because everybody's bringing their own style. You might say my man's is weak, but I realize like, yo, they're still gonna let him speak. And so if I'm not feeling my illest right now, they still gonna respect me. And in turn, I'm gonna respect them. And when you go through a freestyle session with somebody, a bond develops, man. It's different. And that's really something that I took from hip hop. And I said, yo, this is something beautiful that'll allow me to overcome the social boundaries that exist so often. So yeah, I mean, that's what I use it for mostly, man. It's like my campfire. You know what I mean? But it's also my passion that's on fire at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you said how you became kind of isolated from like the music you and your friends were listening to, I kind of thought about how when most people think about hip hop music in general, they tend to tune in on themes of like the violence, the drugs, like the street talk in the music. how prominent do you think these themes are, and are there other underlying themes that are worth talking about in the hip hop music?
Oh yeah, I mean, the one thing that I can say about hip hop in this era, especially where you have so much choice, is you have the ability to choose whatever you want to listen to, matched by the fact that there's so much out there that it's overwhelming. And so what happens is that people default to the most general of feelings or basic of emotions. And it's sad to say that most of the relatable things in life are either comedy or sadness. You know, romance, of course, is in there, love is in there, there's positive emotions, but the negative, it's so easy for the negative, and often through comedy, we look at the negative, but through a comedic lens, but the negative gets thrown to the forefront. And in those negative records, even in the era where we were really assaulting the content, or let alone even now in this more maybe nuanced and simplified way of expressing certain things, not basic, because the artists who make records that I don't even like, but I might even play on the radio or something like that, you know, like the trap stuff and all that, there is a real component that's raw and real, just like the stuff NWA, Cube, all that kind of stuff, Ice-T. It's the fact that in hip hop we have the ability to come from a place, and a lot of us don't like to acknowledge that place. When you can say, oh, he's talking about shooting people, doing drugs and all this. It's easy to say that, but it's hard to ask why. And I think that's what hip hop does, is it makes us ask questions. And when we identify so closely with the music, it makes us, when we really get to the raw aspect of it, ask us why we feel this way. And what is it about society or about life or about our economic situation, our surroundings, our peers, our family? What is it that makes us feel these deeply seated, negative emotions and experiences, and why are we expressing them as violence? Why are they coming out as something that represents the dark side of living? But the truth is that we're actually turning it into something positive, because to rap about hurting a person is better than actually hurting a person. And if you're successful, hopefully you won't even have to be involved in anything like that, and you can uplift and create opportunities for people to feed their families. But we don't look at that when you just see an Instagram video of some chick shaking her butt. We don't think of all the different things, because we're so caught up in the highlight reel of it now. Just like we were caught up in the single record of the artist. It used to be 3 to 4 minutes. Now it's like 2 minutes and 21 seconds or 1:39. Then you look at a social media video. We're talking 20 seconds to a minute and a half to define an entire human experience that is being told through layers and layers of sound and language. Hip hop in itself is so layered, and it has so much meaning, even when it's just some stupid shit to somebody, that it gets taken for granted. And since it's the most popular, it's the easiest thing to throw the rock at. When you look at the different forms of heavy metal, the crazy, just wild stuff that goes on there, or you look at some romantic music, some R&B and stuff like that, or you look at like even jazz. Jazz comes from a very painful place, as does blues, and like the darkest of all arts, I found out while on tour, is country music. Country music is crazy. They'll talk about killing a whole town, and people don't seem to look at it that way, because they've accepted where it's coming from. The music is called country, Hip hop, unfortunately, is not called hood. You know what I mean? If people understood that more, maybe they would be more understanding. But instead, we still would rather compartmentalize, externalize, and make something into a quick, brief answer so that we can say, oh, we get it, because it's easy to read the headline, but it's hard to accept the loss. But that's what music does, man. It takes things, it takes hard, complicated situations in life, and it expresses them in a succinct fashion, but not always simplified. And also, it doesn't do it at the expense of the complexity. It's just often, because it can be catchy, because again, it's the most popular form of music right now. It get looked at as just, oh, there's another song about doing drugs. Mm-hmm. There's another song about gangs. It's one of the greatest strengths of the music, and one of the weakest aspects of the perception of it as well. But both, unfortunately, aspects of that result in massive controversy and thus popularity, because all the engagement models are just based on discussion, not the content of the discussion. Yeah. So hopefully somewhere within that you can see the value of it still, because I'm thankful that discussions are still being had, because there was a time where they weren't.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So when I was listening to your music, I found the track "Soft" very interesting because it tends to go against like the usual norms that we were just talking about of rap in our current hip hop generation that tends to center around hyper masculinity. Do you think these themes have a real impact on the youth? The rap and hip hop um, is studied that white teens from the age of like 13 to 17 are um, the biggest they listen to hip hop the most.
Yeah.
White teens from the age of 13 to 17.
Okay.
Sorry about that. If so, what do you think is the best way of attacking these negative things in the rap game?
I think we always ask the question of who, but we never ask the question of why. And why does a 13-year-old white kid love hip hop more than whatever other demographic might be complaining, or not even love hip hop, but consume hip hop more than the other demographics of listeners out there and consumers? And I think that they, if you wanna cautiously, I say, delve into what that statistic looks like, they say maybe a white family will have more access to the technology, or also it's more unexpected, like the spectacle of doing something wrong. Like when back in the day when you're a kid, you're young, you know what I'm saying, you're like 16, 17, and somebody pulls out that they stole somebody's porno book or something back in the day, when, you know what I'm saying, that's how it was. Now it's phones and stuff, but finding something vulgar, a rated R movie even, that's how demonized in some families still to this day, as obviously as that perspective may seem, that's how much of a, like, to those previous generations, it's like, ew, why are you doing that? So, or not the hip hop, you know what I'm saying, get more into the rock, not the rap, you know what I'm saying, or get more into whatever, do the gospel. Like, it's what you resist persists. So I think that in your average urban black, brown, whatever household, nobody's mad when you decide to start listening to Young Thug or Lil Baby or Wu-Tang or Nas. But when you're like, you live in suburbia and you're like, I don't want to listen to that, Dad. I'm put this Gangstar on or put this, Future on or something. And they start hearing it and listening to it, and then they catch on only those negative sides. They're like, what is this? This is unacceptable. And that makes the kid want to listen to it more. Because that's what we do when we're young. We go against our parents and their preconceived notions, which we should. Because, people who convince themselves that they know become more ignorant than those who are willing to learn. And that's the constant conflict of the young versus the old, and, and the old versus the new, and the works versus doesn't. This process of learning that we're living is an experience, and it's all based on the experimentation of different things and this and that. And the problem is that the this and the that, there's no communication in between it. And I think it's easier for those groups of people to unite, especially if they have access to the technology and the internet, and they can reach from the bottom to the top of the culture now using just social media. You can feel close to these artists now, and you can feel close to the music. You can feel close to the hood experience because of how well marketed and also how well presented it is these days, both on professional and independent level with viral moments and whatnot. And so it creates that environment and that ecosystem that I think is what makes it so popular within those areas. I'll never forget this little middle schooler I was teaching. I was like, yo, so what do you listen to? Because, I was kind of getting it was kind of hard to get some rhymes out of him. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't make them write about proficiency or with the rules of, yo, you got to count these bars, you got to kick this right, I want punchlines here. I don't structure their music. I focus on process. And he was hard to reach until I caught him listening to Blueface. And he was in the Tatiana. And I was like, oh, so that's what you want. You know what I'm saying? And I was like, why? I asked him a question about why do you like it versus turn that off or that sucks. Because that's what people do. Oh, that's garbage. No, tell me why you like it. Let's explore your appreciation and how you identify with it so that I no longer have to look at it as an id, but that I can see that it's your thing and it may not be my thing, but I can respect it. Otherwise, you're just going to turn it up and turn me down. And that's how I managed to reach that kid, man. But I think a lot of those misunderstandings are what creates that consumer marketplace. And then the other side of it, sadly, of course, there's always a downside, is that they don't get too familiar with the consequences. They get familiar with the brand. And the consequences are what long term, whether it be getting turned on to music that makes you do drugs or makes you party or displaces your values, in a non-productive fashion. That's what creates the other problem and makes it more of a problem to the people who are not engaged with the culture and are unwilling to actually explore and experience the culture. Is they say, it's just like how right now in the news, it's all about fentanyl, There's a lot of drugs besides fentanyl. And there's lots of people, my friend Strick that died, he died from opiates, he died from heroin. But now fentanyl is the epidemic, But like people don't look at all the things and all the things that fail between here and there. Just like in hip hop, there's so many messages that go all the way to the other side of it before you reach a level where you're at your bottom like that. And it's easy to point the finger yet again, quantify it and say, this is the problem. So like, big problem, big solution. Those kids, they spend money, they have access, they get money, they create an audience, they're excited, they're enthused, they're not jaded, they create trends. But on the other side, they create statistics. So that therein is the problem of the perception. But I think that's what makes it such an attractive thing for that group of people is it's dangerous. When it's not really though, but it is.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We can take a break a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to make sure it's filming still. All right, we're all good. All right. So Richmond has a vibrant music scene. How did you find your place within it, and what were some challenges you faced breaking into the local music scene?
Yeah, the word no. No, everybody tells you no. And they say in the music business, rejection, right? But the biggest challenge for me was I started out and I had to figure me out first, right? Like, got on stage, did a set, and my general number one concern was, this has got to sound like the CD, right? I didn't understand performance. And then I did it, and it was nerve-wracking and super uncomfortable. It wasn't like when I'm with my guys and I'm freestyling. And so then I stepped back and I studied the game. And I was looking and I was like, these guys are doing their stuff over their vocals. These guys got a band. These guys, they're super steeped in like backpack or whatever you want to call it, boom bapism. I was like, what can I do to really, figure out my own inner MC? And once I found that by deciding to focus on no, which means I show up, for instance, at a show, everything goes wrong. The only thing I can depend on is me. So I need to learn how to adapt, which means freestyle. I need to learn how to work through any bad sound system, which means projection, which means articulation, which means knowing what my records sound like in different situations. Lots of self-research so that I could implement my perspective and my abilities in the best way in the working system that there was in infrastructure. And what I found on that side of it was, okay, now I know me, and now I have the confidence to believe I'm nice. Now I have to figure out how these shows are working and who's doing what. And one of the things that I learned is you never go for the person that's in the front, you go for the person that's always there with them. Because that'll get you closer. And in the hip hop show, the person who's always there, especially in the indie showcase, is the DJ. So you treat things like you're already involved, and eventually somebody's gonna be like, yo, who are you? And whenever there was an opportunity to freestyle, I was up there. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'll never forget, we were at a show one time, and I was with one of my he's like a cousin of me, and he knew me from when I was real young, and he was like, yo, they're talking about freestyling, man. You said, maybe you should go up there. And then he said, he turned around, and I was gone, and he looked, and I was on the stage. And like, that's what allowed me, taking that attitude and taking it to every situation. People were telling everybody no when it came to getting on the beat or on the Power 92. All right, cool. I'm just gonna get on the radio myself. I want to become the radio. I can't get paid for a show. All right, I'm gonna throw shows. I threw shows for 8 years. I threw over 40 events called Face Melt Friday at Strange Matter before that place closed down. I booked independent artists from all over Virginia. Hundreds of them by the time it was done. From like the count, people gave me a count. They're like, there was over 100 and something people, yo. I never thought of it that way. I just wanted to create an experience where people saw themselves. And so the big challenge was always dealing with the next level of success while people thinking it was about me. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to be asked questions that were very hard to answer in high pressure scenarios. And I had the wherewithal to think, I can bet on me. Saying you're asking me, so I'm going to tell you what you're asking of me and how much of myself I'm willing to give to that. That's how I opened for Snoop at the National before anybody ever knew that was even possible. And I'll never forget, they were like, I had a conference call, and they were like, why should we give you the show? And I told them, look, I'm not going to lie to you and say I'm going to do this, this, and this, and I'm going to blow your mind, but I'm going to tell you I'm going to give you 100% of myself. And I'm going to bust my ass from A to Z. And they were like, you got to sell these tickets. I'm going to hit the streets like I'm selling drugs. Like, I'm going hard for this. And, you know, they put me on the show, and then they asked for, like, somebody else and for me to suggest. And the people who would always help me out was a group called the Photosynthesizers. And Sam Reed, who sings now, she was in that group, my man Mike Medic. And they'd always, you know, represented their MC barcodes was always a high standard. So I was willing to look at somebody who I admired and give them the opportunity that I was getting that I could have kept to myself. That idea of success meaning sharing, and sharing success in all the things that I did, creating spaces like radio and creating events and working in places where I wasn't expected to be, like education and whatnot, finding strange opportunities instead of trying to compete with everybody who was already doing things that were not going anywhere. That's what really allowed me to open the doors and to gain respect, and being consistent and not quitting in a year. Like dedicating a long amount of time to, by other people's perspectives, to me it's short, but dedicating a serious amount of time, shall we say, consistently to building something is what allowed me to really find my way in this impenetrable maze of music in Richmond. Because the radio, the mainstream radio, was seen as the ivory tower. But the bottom line is the people at the mainstream radio, they came from here. The big director of 106.5, he was a programming director here at this station, you know? And, you know, Skills and all, they had Jigga at this station and stuff like that. It's all connected. Skills, all that stuff, it's all that's connected to this place. It's connected to downtown. It's connected to all those venues. I was willing to do that research on that history and accept it and use it by a standard, not by an expectation or by something where I'm being like so-and-so. No, like I'm just gonna follow the path, and I'm gonna go with my investment in myself and share it with others. And when people doubt me and they talk about me in a negative fashion, I'm gonna find those people, and instead of being like, yo, I heard what you said, punk, I'm gonna find out why they said it and why they feel that way and what we can do to fix that. And so I invested a major portion of my life to this, and that's what made the difference. And that's why I have all the respect and freedom that I have now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me take that in. So I'm from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge rap city.
Yeah.
Arguably one of the biggest rap cities.
Yeah, pretty much now, yeah, especially.
So how do you think Richmond varies from Atlanta in the hip hop game? Like, what are some attributes, factors that's different than these big rap cities like the Bronx, for example, Atlanta, Detroit, even? Like, what are some factors and like attributes of the cities that may be different than Richmond?
Oh yeah, so look, I did a show in Bushwick up in New York one time, right? And I'll never forget, I was standing out there, it was late night, got a dude who's A$AP Ferg's cousin, and he had just done a show the day before in front of like thousands of people, and then he was here at this small venue in front of like 40 or 50, and they were still hyping everything, but afterwards, you know, he's out there, and I just stood back and watched, and people were all like talking to him in an upward fashion, like he's elevated, you know, and he was like, man, yeah, it's just like, you know, people need to come together and work together, you know what I'm saying, more for us to do more stuff. And I was like, holy shit, he's saying the same exact thing that you hear in Richmond. And I was like, I'm in New York, you know what I'm saying? And I'm hearing the same exact talk that I hear in my city, and that I've heard in my city, you know, and that I've fought the same mentality by creating my event series, by doing my radio shows and making it so people didn't have to go and feel disrespected by radio, but instead felt invited. You could come to my show. You could send me your record, it was clean. I would clean your record for you and put you on the radio because I wanted you to have the same feeling I had the first time I heard me played on the radio. You know, like I was doing all these things, and I think in those other cities, there's just more of me. There's more me's in those other cities who are trying to do more of that and create a Venn diagram and uniting the differences. But also on the other side, the real thing and the big word that always comes up is the M word, which is money. There's an active commerce in those cities, in those bigger hubs of music, and an industry that's industrious versus an industry that is cannibalistic to itself, where there's a parasitic or a parasitic or predatory model. There's always going to be that in the music industry. But I think when you don't have more of the positive and you still have the negative business ethics that being practiced in your city, that it eats your city's commerce from the inside out alive. And I think that's what and people ask me, I could have left Richmond a long time ago, and I never did because I built everything that I do. And I was willing to, and I was willing to see, I would rather present, this is what I have to offer to somebody that I deal with in another city where there's a bigger hub. You know what I'm saying? Like, and people don't think there's bigger hubs in places like Minnesota. Minneapolis has an incredible hip hop scene, you know, but I was able to take my indie ethics and get cool with Rhyme Sayers, who's like the biggest indie label in hip hop, you know, on a pretty well-known scale, but also especially from a 90s to current contemporary zone, they're still very active and still, you know, they do the big shows, you know what I'm saying, and they play Atmosphere plays festivals and stuff. But I was able to present my model and be related to without it being like, oh, you're just a guy trying to get on, because they understood that I'd put in the work over the time and I'd proven it had the reputation. In other cities, you can move faster. And I used to watch people leave Richmond because they were like, yo, this ain't taking me nowhere. And I'd be like, yo, move with pride instead of resentment and go to another city and do your best to get into their hustle, but understand you're going to have to buy into their infrastructure. And so that's the thing that's in opposition. There's not enough money in Richmond's hip hop scene. When I got into my rock band and into the punk scene, I was amazed at how people line up at our table to buy merch just like the headliners. And we can make stupid money in a small night of 60 people. We can make stupid money off merch. As at a hip hop show, ain't nobody checking for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, ain't nobody checking for you on a level like that. Ain't nobody coming up to talk. Ain't nobody treating you. People aren't going into the venue when they see the schedule says the show starts at 8. They know the headliner's not on until 9:30. So they're not even showing up till 9 in Richmond for a rap show. At a rock show, they're there at 7:50. And when it's 8 o'clock, I've seen it. They go, oh, it's 8 o'clock, it's time for the show to start. And there's not even a host. They just go in and they're like, we're here for it, you know? And they buy stuff all night. So I think people blame one singular aspect of it, but it's a combination of things where you don't have a consumerist, you know, mentality where there's commerce and people are like fans to the point where they monetize and convert to transactions. And then you also have people who would rather have likes and different presentation aspects instead of having their business lined up, you know, having their publishing established, getting the trademark, starting an LLC, figuring out exactly what their business model is, navigating, you know, profit and loss and investments, and being willing to invest instead spend, and own instead of acquired, you know what I'm saying, and build instead of want, you know, and complain about what's missing. You know, one of my favorite things I ever heard was from Heather Waters, who does the Richmond Independent Film and Music Festival here. And she was like, what I get inspired by is seeing where things could be. I get inspired by nothing when I could see something versus there being something and nobody doing anything. And that's what helped me move. But in other cities versus Richmond, what happens is people look at it and like, oh, they're doing it big. They're so unified in Atlanta. No, they're not. It's the same level of division and the same level of like, you know, people trying to work against and with each other. And it's grimy and it's great. But there's more of it. And at the end of the day, there's a greater flow of commerce in some of those avenues. And a lot of funding from strange places, of course, too. But it's just a bigger pot where people can put more money into it and hopefully get something else out of it. And they have more examples of results to keep people hanging on and chase the dragon. Whereas around here, ain't many who've made it. And those who have made it in unique ways that are not necessarily identifiable because they've had to do unique things to create a unique lifestyle for themselves. So, I mean, it's definitely a combination of factors, but it's... And also the last thing, of course, is that on the market scheme for traveling acts and for touring, and hip hop, Richmond has typically been a C to D market, and a city like Atlanta is going to be an A or a B, and you know, B in a bad time. But typically, I mean, if you're in the A, that's an A. You go out west LA, that's an A. You know, like that's going to be where you have tiered levels. In Richmond, you have the Camel, which is like a 300 person venue or something like that. You have the Broadberry, which is like, I think 800 to 1,000 maybe. And then you have the National, which is like 2,000, 2,500, you know what I'm saying, I believe. And then you have different levels. I've heard it can go up higher than that, but like you have different capacity venues in other cities in a more tiered structure, whereas around here you have like four choices, you know? You had the Canal Club, but they're not doing hip hop shows anymore because they're afraid of hip hop in some ways, you know? Like they do some now, but there was a time where if we got into a fight at one hip hop show in Richmond, it affected all the hip hop shows in Richmond. And that was a strange time. And they do it in weird ways that were obviously overtly like creating a bias towards a certain type of consumer or customer, like by enforcing dress codes and things, hurdles that will like isolate a urban audience. And there was a time where we went through that on a very, very large level, and people didn't step up to combat it like you would want. Or they put the 21 and up thing on the door, and no longer could an 18-year-old go to a rap show in Richmond. And then what happens? They start doing house shows. And then you do house shows, you have ordinances, you have capacities, you have a no performance license, you have underage drinking, then the police get involved. And it turns into something else again. And of course, there's no money that's being made. Like you're making money, pocket money, but you're not making money on like on your W-2. You know, you have no business assigned to it. And that's what tends to slowly unravel the business, is that like people get defeated by that instead of stepping up to that challenge and trying to figure out, how can I take this thing and put it in a building? And how can I make it into something that's a business instead of me making money? Because you're gonna make money through your business, but if your business is making money, it's gotta be diversified. Hip hop and music is a diversified culture and industry, but you're not gonna make money in hip hop right away. It's like a restaurant. Everybody loves the food before you ever start getting paid. And you gotta learn how to serve people the food in a place that they wanna keep coming to and in a way that they'll look forward to. And a lot of people haven't figured that out. I figured it out for 8 years. Yeah.
So you talk about how important your connections have been with different artists. Mm-hmm. Are there any artists or even people in your life that have really influenced you and impacted you? Whatever is it, if it's through your music or just how you live, because your philosophy in life, I researched, is there's no other way now. So like I just want to hear a little bit about that too.
So like I mean, one of the things, the people who inspired me, not only my peers, like Noah O with his Charged Up, and now him having a Charged Up business and Charged Up being a diversified LLC and enterprise from the beginning. They had a studio, they had the electricity or just anything. Like Charged Up was a brand, and I always loved that he did that. And now he's turned that into like a brick and mortar store, and he sells his clothes and his merch and all that. I've always loved that, and that's been inspiring me. The same with the Paperboy from Petersburg, I believe. He did the same sort of thing. He was the first guy to have merch and to show us that like, yo, like you can get money selling things that are ancillary to your actual music. And I mean, Rhyme Sayers became a very big thing for me, because when I got invited, Slug from Atmosphere invited me to go out there from this. I was doing radio, and he found out about my show. He listened, he hollered at me, we built a relationship, and then he was like, hey, just a random question, you want to come out to our festival? And I didn't know anything about it. And I didn't think, what's going on with hip hop in Minneapolis? And I went out there, and this is like a 38,000 person festival. They had Nas performing on Illmatic. They had 2 Chainz, you know what I'm saying, Tyler the Creator in Earl Sweatshirt, what's his name, Wiz Khalifa. Like I went to this thing, and Soundset used to just be a show in a parking lot. And they built it to a thing where it became too big even for the fairgrounds, like with mainstream artists, multi-million-dollar event. And at the same time, though, these guys were still making indie hip hop. So they fascinated me, and they've been a major motivating force in helping me choose to sometimes do more by doing less, but also recognize that you don't have a choice. This just is what it is. I always believe a lot of people things are hard until they realize that things just are what they are. It may mean that it's not easy, but it just is what it is. And that acceptance, that attitude of acceptance, and things going horribly wrong in my life all the time, watching my father get sentenced to life in prison, like that stuff made me realize this choice that I make does not have an alternative. So there is no other way for me. And the only way for me to make it work is within the present, which is now. And I've taken that and I built a business off of it. I built a work ethic off of it. I built a lifestyle off of it. I have a business partner named BC. You know, my circle was big when I started. Now my circle is really tight. And, you know, he and I file taxes together. It's like that, you know, like that's crazy and weird to me. But it was a necessity and it's living proof. And like you have to give it up to the people who've come before you, whether it be our local heroes who are not local people, but like as far as they're natives, but they're not local in the limits of their work. Their work is worldwide. Their connections are worldwide. My connections are now worldwide. You know, there's so many people who have those connections. People like Lonnie B, or even like I said, Mike Street, you know what I'm saying? Skills, you know what I'm saying? Like these people alone, 3 easy names to know just by reaching your arm out. They have connections from the bottom to the top of the industry. Skills wrote the tribute joint for Hove. Like, it's a real thing. And people would rather look at something like that and be like, man, whatever. Then be like, yo, this is incredible. And it's you have somebody right here who's showing you can too. You look at Pharrell, you look at all this stuff the Neptunes did, how they've changed the world. And I've never understood how somebody couldn't look at that and recognize that I may not become Drake, right? But I certainly can accept and respect the fact that Drake was hanging out with Nicholas F. in Richmond. They went to one of my producers' houses one time. And he called me and was like, yeah, Nick came through with this guy named Drake that Cash Money's looking at before he was anybody. You know, Trey Songz, like all these things, Young Money Yawn, all these things are connected directly within 3 hours from our places in Richmond. So it's like, how can you not look around you with all these people who figured out a way to do it, to make something out of nothing, and feel like you don't have a place to start? It's just you have to be willing to choose to deal with yourself and then deal with the rest of the world. That's why like, when I get up, I work out, because I believe if I conquer myself, I can conquer the world. But I had to make strong, difficult choices with the absolute level of acceptance for better or for worse in order for me to understand that I can if I choose to. But I will, you know what I'm saying, only most times because nobody else wants to go. I find myself alone constantly in being like, all right, what's the next move? I get rejected. I get turned down. I don't stop and say, oh no. I say, all right, well, how am I going to do it? Because it's all part of it. If you've already decided, you don't have to make any more decisions. I think a lot of people get caught up in how hard it can be to deal with the constant brutal aspect of this business and of this experience and this art form, and putting out something and not getting the numbers that you thought you were going to get, or coming up against the wall of having to pay, but then not recognizing that like you can release a project and you can sell out of it on physical medium and you'll make 10 times what you would have made if you got streams, like 1 million streams. You know, like you have to figure out, am I doing this for attention, or am I doing this for something bigger than that? Because you're gonna get the attention. That model can be whipped up later on down it, but like you have to decide to cultivate an audience, and you got to be willing to take it on the chin over and over again. So I mean, that's kind of where the no other way stuff comes from. I just had so many people let me down, and I've had so many things go wrong in my life. And when I started this, I was on food stamps. You know what I'm saying? And I was just, I would come here from work. You know what I'm saying? Broke, busted, you know what I'm saying? But I would still make sure, even if I had to like climb, I had a Cadillac, man, we called it the Black Cadillac, and both doors on that joint were broken in the front. I had to climb in through the back at 88 DeVille. I used to climb in through the back of that joint and do whatever I had to do, go to any show. You know what I'm saying? I go to work in my outfit I go to the show in my work outfit, and I would crush that show. And then I would bounce, you know what I'm saying? Or I would go and I would do my radio show after a whole bunch of craziness, or just, we didn't know how we were going to get there, just that we were going to get there. And I think a lot of people forget about that, man. They forget, they're like, this sucks. All this sucks. It's terrible. But that's why it's awesome when you do it. Because you like, once you figure it out and how to deal with it, it's like pro wrestlers, man. How many times do they fall a day? But they always get back up. But they don't ever try to avoid falling. And they just learn how to fall better, because you're going to keep falling in this shit, man. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I do. And a lot of people, they just want to be up, yo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's totally right. So, kind of going off that, what lessons have you learned, what advice would you give to aspiring artists in Richmond or elsewhere who are looking to pursue a career in music, and what lessons have you learned that you'd like to share with them?
All right. Well, number one thing I would say is read Donald Passman's All You Need to Know About the Music Business. Donald Passman has this book that he's put out edition after edition of. It's even a more updated one than the one I read that addresses a lot of the current trendings and technology type business practices and whatnot. Don't read it to get answers. Read it to get a vocabulary. Because how can you ask the right questions if you don't know the language? And that's super important. First off, is educate yourself as much as possible on how things work or can work, not how they're supposed to be. Your expectations are the one thing that'll always be working against you. Like if you expect something to go how it's gonna go, it's definitely not gonna happen that way. That's life and everything, but in music business especially, never that. You can dot every I and cross every T and still get stabbed in the back, or have things just fall flat, or have money disappear, or something go wrong. So you have to really prepare yourself through as much information instead of expectation as possible, and recognize that you are still the asset that you're bringing to the situation. Nobody can offer you an opportunity you're not willing to offer to yourself first. And nobody's going to offer you an opportunity unless they see that you're out there like, I don't need you. In my opinion, hunger is not something that allows you to eat others. Hunger means I'm going to eat regardless. And in this game, people respect that. But you have to eat healthy. You have to eat with ethics, you know what I'm saying? And so those are the things that I've learned, especially, is that goes in any level, in any avenue, in any work, in any environment. That goes to your benefit. My dad, I remember when he was working in the fiber optics industry, we went to a telecommunications node that he'd set up. And he showed me the wires that other people had done, then he showed me the wires he'd set up. And he said, you see mine and you see theirs? You see how mine is always, you see how organized this is? He's like, nobody's gonna see this, you know what I'm saying? But if they do, they're gonna know it's me. Or if they ask, they're gonna find out it's me. You have to treat everything with that same level of care. The smallest things and the biggest things are all connected. It's not about when, because all there is the present that you're working in, the resources you're working with. A lot of people think they can wait until things get better, or that they're in a better situation, that they have more money to do something with this opportunity that we have to give to ourselves. But the truth is that it's only now. You're not going to be able to improve your circumstances if you don't work on yourself first. The hardest lessons I've learned have all come from things going really, really wrong. Going and having one thing happen that's life destroying, and then getting the email that says, now you got to do all this work if you want this opportunity. When I got the Snoop show, for instance, I had to put my dog down because he had cancer. And so we took him to the vet, and we did that. And this was the worst experience ever, where I had to hold him while they gave him the shot, and he was trying to bite everybody, right? It was like horrible. And this is my man's, you know what I'm saying? We stared each other in the eye before we went into the building. We did that. And then when I got home, I had to go to a meeting at the other radio station, and I got there and found out the email was canceled. So I mean, the interviews and the meetings was canceled, and I checked my email, right? And in that same email thread, like a folder of inbox, I had an email saying, we want to talk to you about the Snoop show. So then I had to think, and this is all on the same day, I had to think, now I gotta go into my mind. You know what I'm saying? I gotta get out of my feelings and accept that life has offered me something extremely negative while offering me something else that's extremely positive, and both are gonna require work. And I had to step up. And things like that happen to me all the time. So it's just like, you gotta learn to look at life through a lens that's bigger than how you feel right now and how something's affecting you, and look at the bigger impact that you can have in a positive way. Because we can build with the bricks that are thrown at us in life. And we can build with every soul-crushing situation. And so I hit rock bottom, man, and that became my foundation. And when things got crazy and nobody thought I would, I got sober. You know what I'm saying? I added to my life by subtracting. And then I dealt with the fact that nobody wanted to be around because the party was over. But I kept working, and I rebuilt myself and my world again. Because you always learn also in life that you need a lot less than you think. You'll always need way less. You know what I'm saying? So much less. Less money, less resources, and less time. Because once you get out there, you'll start realizing, all right, if you believe that you can, you will. Even if it doesn't work out the first time. You know what I mean? Everybody's failed hundreds and thousands of times. That ain't nothing. Yeah.
That's extremely inspirational, man. I mean,
hey.
So we're nearing the end of the interview. I just one question: do you have anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to get off your mind?
Yeah. How can I phrase this? It's okay, yo. It's okay to fail. It's okay to not become a superstar. It's okay to make music for yourself. It's okay to use a process to help you figure out your own situation in life and how to express it better. It doesn't have to turn into something somebody trades for money. So many people make music and they feel like they're failing. So many people play a sport and they feel like they're failing simply because they didn't go to some place that somebody else used, some arbitrary position or number or statistic or plaque or number of plays, something that they did to define it as successful. Success is not what somebody else perceives. It certainly can be, but success before anything is how it makes you feel on the inside and what that process brings to your life. You know, it's not about whether or not in the outcome somebody says you won or that you're the best. It's about putting your best forward and recognizing that was today, I'm going to start again from the bottom tomorrow. And just going with that and making that your priority function in the ways you organize every aspect of your life possible, it'll allow you to engage and live life with appreciation for people who are on their journey and you being on yours. And when you have that in your mind, it allows you to view people not only from a humble perspective, but also with a greater level of empathy and understanding. We don't have to like each other. We don't have to approve of each other's actions or type of music. We don't have to do that, but we do need to give each other at least some respect and some room to grow. Because I don't know anybody that's not growing except people that are dead. You know what I'm saying? So life is about learning. The moment you stop learning is the moment you stop living. I don't ever want to know anything. The only thing that I'm certain about is that I'm willing to learn. And that's, you know what I'm saying? Like I said in the one song, I take L's that I earn, so I learn. That's me. You know what I'm saying? That's the motto, man. It's just, like, if you're going to lose, so what? If you're going to win, so what? Because we got to go forward, man. We got to keep going forward. We got to take this with us. And if you can pick it up, get that whole bag of bricks, put it down, man. Because when life offers you the greatest opportunity that you've been working your whole life for, if you got all your baggage in your hands, you're not going to be able to carry it. So, yeah. That's it, yo.
Appreciate it.
Already, man.
Yeah.